And welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight, commercial free from the 1st Republican caucus state of Iowa tonight. And the Power Hour commercial free begins in Israel, where Hamas animals continue to use the Palestinian people as human shields as they hold somewhere around 100 hostages. As many as 20 of them are Americans. Just 1 month ago, the Biden White House, with yet another incredible display of incompetence, agreed to open up $6 billion for 5 American hostages. The White House points out that the $6 billion was technically frozen Iranian assets, but that doesn't really matter. The U.S. paid a ransom regardless of semantics, and an insane ransom at that, over $1 billion per person. That is a very likely reason Hamas Neanderthals, who were killing and raping women and children, actually had the foresight to kidnap so many people that they would rather simply slaughter. American policy had changed. Now the U.S., a country with too much money and too little spine, is paying 10 figures per hostage. Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, another overeducated D.C. elite with no common sense, indicated over the weekend that Biden may be ready to negotiate again.
One senior political operative with Hamas floated the possibility a few days ago of a potential prisoner swap with the U.S. for the release of hostages. Would the U.S. entertain that?
We have not looked at that we have not heard from them something like that. President Biden has shown over the course of the past few years that he will make hard decisions to get American hostages home.
So the people running the most powerful country in the world negotiate like they're governing Portugal or some island out there somewhere. The evil powers of the Middle East have long been terrified of American might, and in this moment it is nowhere to be found. In the past, American presidents with spines would have sent a very simple message: release them, or you and everyone you've ever known will be vaporized before the weekend. This is why the world is falling apart. It's mostly our fault. And maybe it's intentional. If you didn't catch 60 Minutes last night with Biden on it, it was quite a spectacle. The president was basically asleep for the entire 15-minute interview. The only time he actually showed any real spark was when Scott Pelley asked the United States if the United States, $33 trillion in debt, can handle supporting 2 different foreign wars.
Are the wars in Israel and Ukraine more than the United States can take on at the same time?
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world.
Point to the greatness of a nation that he's put into rapid decline as a reason to cheer on our involvement in 2 different conflicts that his weakness has created. Biden was also asked about Iran's involvement in the Hamas attack. He tried to squirm around that obvious reality, as it would be a clear indictment of his foreign policy failure from just a month ago, but he still couldn't avoid admitting the very obvious. Take a look.
At this point, no evidence that Iran is behind any of this.
Correct. Now, Iran constantly supports Hamas and Hezbollah. I don't mean that. But in terms of did they have foreknowledge? Did they help plan the attack? There's no evidence of that at this point.
So he says Iran constantly supports Hamas and Hezbollah. Naturally, there's no follow-up from Scott Pelley. Like, okay, so why on earth did you just give them billions of dollars? Now, they save those tough questions for the people that they don't actually vote for. On Sunday, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby spun himself into circles to avoid saying the very obvious in this moment, that yes, Iran is going to get that $6 billion. There's really no way to stop it because the deal has already been made.
It's all still in Qatar. None of it has been accessed, and we're watching it like a hawk.
Will they ever be able to access it? Is it truly that you can refreeze it, in essence, or whatever terminology you'd like to use, so they don't have access to it?
They have not accessed it. We are watching it. We're watching it like a hawk, Shannon.
That's supposed to be an answer. The deal is done. It's their money. You know it. Iran knows it. Qatar knows it. Stop trying to cover up yet another tragedy, another disaster, another egregious foreign policy disaster. There's too many to count at this point. What Kirby should be doing is warning Americans not to go anywhere near North Africa or the Middle East, because American hostages are now the hottest commodity in the world. Because in Joe Biden's America, we pay ransoms. We also evidently hire anti-West extremists to help embolden and strengthen the worst countries on the planet. as Joe Biden did when he hand-selected Robert Malley to revive the disastrous Iran nuclear deal from the Obama years. Biden's hand-chosen Iran envoy is now under FBI investigation for working for the benefit of Iran while representing our country in our State Department. And now the New York Post is reporting that Malley has been openly critical of Israel in the past, and his family has ties, Robert Malley's family has ties to the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO. On the fringes of terrorism for decades, our State Department envoy to Iran, tasked with handling our side of the negotiation, is a flat-out Iran-loving terrorist sympathizer. This is like hiring an arsonist to be the fire chief in your town. The Post reporting that Yasser Arafat, longtime head of the PLO, was Robert Malley's unofficial godfather as a child. This is the person Biden put in charge of handling Iran. This is how we are dismantling the United States. We are installing our deconstructionists into our own government. It's so similar when you think about it to the Soros-funded district attorneys who don't believe in punishing crime. It's the same thing. It's oxymoronic, it's psychotic. It is the left running America in 2023. Our open border is another prime example. In recent days, more Middle East terror suspects captured coming across from Mexico, flagged as potential terrorists from Iran, Egypt, and Lebanon. Imagine what it takes to get from Lebanon to the United States by way of walking through Mexico. And for the past 2 years, this has been happening in our country. And you've been told disagreeing with that border policy is racist by incompetent people who fully deny reality until it hits them right in the face, and it always does. And then we're left to clean it all up. Earlier this month, here was Jake Sullivan bragging about how quiet the Middle East has been under Joe Biden.
The war in Yemen is in its 19th month of truce. For now, the Iranian attacks against U.S. forces have stopped. Our presence in Iraq is stable. I emphasize for now because all of that can change. And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades.
1 week after he made that comment, the Middle East was in chaos and on the brink of a full-scale war that could escalate rapidly. Here's leaders from Hamas and Iran meeting in Qatar on Saturday. Just shaking hands, hugging. I'm sure the theme was mission accomplished. The bad actors of the world hit the lottery when Biden was elected. This is an insane moment for this country. I doubt they even expected it to be this good. Sebastian Gorka joins me now. And sir, it's good to have you back on the show. Your former boss on Truth Social saying that Iran is rapidly building a large-scale arsenal of nuclear weapons. Once they have them, which will be soon, all negotiations will stop, he says. And he's exactly right.
Well, we know that. Every Friday, what do they say in the mosques in Tehran and all over Persia? If they're in the control of the mullahs, they say that the great Satan must be destroyed along with the lesser Satan. Well, who is the great Satan? It's us. That's why it was one of the proudest moments of my time in the White House, Rob, when Steve Bannon and myself were called into the Oval Office. The cabinet were arrayed in front of us, and the president, he called us his heavies, and he said, all right, guys, you tell them why we killed Obama's JCPOA Iran deal. And we explained it. We explained it to H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor. We explained it to the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, that this isn't just about, making sure Israel isn't turned into a sheet of glass. It's about making sure the biggest state sponsor of terrorism doesn't get the nuclear bomb. And guess what happens? They want to revivify the JCPOA. They have already given $16 billion. Forget about this $6 billion that's magically floating around some bank somewhere. They've already given billions. The Biden administration is helping our enemies. Why? The math is very simple, Rob. We live in a perverse time in history where our nation, the greatest nation on earth, is run by those who hate it. And if you hate America, remember what Obama said, you've got to fundamentally change it. If you hate America like Obama, like Biden, like all of his flunkies, who are you going to be friends with? You're going to be friends with America's enemies like Iran, and you are going to be wagging your finger at our allies like Israel. What is the first thing Biden said? He's 4 days late, the massacre in Israel, and he says, oh, Israel better abide by the Geneva Conventions. Well, did he say that about Hamas as they're killing babies, slaughtering grandmothers? That's the perverse age we live in, Rob.
The Robert Malley situation inside this administration is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Reportedly, Yasser Arafat was the unofficial godfather of Robert Malley. This is who Biden picks to secure the Iran nuclear deal. Handpicked by Biden. I've never seen anything like that. You're bringing people in who are doing the bidding of governments that hate us. The entire parliament or whatever they have in Iran, we've seen the videos of them shouting death to America. And you bring in somebody that's loyal to that country to work in our State Department to deal with that country. I mean, that is, to me, that's highly treasonous.
But don't worry, Rob. The FBI is arresting 61-year-old grandmothers who walked through the velvet rope on January 6th, and they're surveilling Catholics because they go to Latin Mass. Remember what we were told after January 6th. The biggest operation in the FBI history, with 1,000 people arrested, was the January 6th investigation. How many people do we think Hamas have secreted into the at least 8 million illegals who've crossed the border since Biden became president? This is the situation we live in. And Malley, what about the woman who's very much like him, who is now chief of staff for the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict? What about that? How many agents of influence working for Iran are secreted through the whole of the government? That's the question. I don't think the FBI has got any time or resources left to answer for us.
Yeah. And then fathom how many different areas of our government they've done this same thing. How many different snakes we have that are working inside of our government. And like I said, it's just like having a DA that's pro-crime. I mean, it's just completely antithetical to the whole mission, and that's exactly how you dismantle something like that. I got one more thing for you. For years now, they've been pretending that it's normal to see people that are on the terror watch list pop up in the Rio Grande, coming across from Mexico. Which, they've been just ignoring that. And they've let this border stay open. And we've been seeing these people come across for 2 years now. You wonder what's in the works with people from some of the most radical countries in the world somehow getting to Central America and then walking hundreds of miles just to get into the United States.
Let's just remind the world the greatest terror attack of the modern age on the United States, September the 11th, 3,000 killed in 102 minutes on one Tuesday morning, was executed by 19 terrorists. 19. 150 have been intercepted in just the last 3 months crossing the border. Those are the ones we know of. That's almost 10 times the size of the September 11th team. A very sober individual, a good friend of my radio show, former nuclear artillery officer, former vice president of the Heritage Foundation, Jim Carafano, said, the next 9/11, it's going to be much worse. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. When Colonel Carafano says something like that, guys, you better get ready. And we need to get my former boss back in the White House. Do you remember 4 years of peace, Rob? 4 years of peace.
Amazing. So true. Sebastian Gorka, always good to see you, sir. Thank you so much.
God bless. Thank you, Rob.
I want to bring in Aaron Cohen.